Alireza Firouzja has just got through one of the most historic chess performances of all time. He gained 108 Blitz rating points, and I'm looking back at some of the best games from the tournament. So this is the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz, this is the Blitz section, and I'm covering two games in this video. It's the destruction of Leinier Domínguez, a phenomenal player in his own right, former World Blitz champion in 2008. Now granted that was 14 years ago, but still he's very dangerous. He did struggle this tournament, but what a player he is, as we'll see in this game. So this is the first game from round one of the Blitz, or day one of the Blitz. Alireza has black here. Let's see what happened. So we had e4 from Leinier, e5. Now I don't want to spend too long in the opening here. We go for an Italian game, so not the Roy Lopez with bishop b5. Alireza goes knight f6. And now if white goes knight g5, you get all of the fried liver stuff with pawn d5, etc. But he just goes d3 instead. You see this a lot more at the top level. Bishop c5 from Alireza, castles, pawn to d6, c3 played, prepares d4 later. Alireza castles, pawn h3, common idea, take away g4, give the king some luft. Pawn a5, standard move. Gives the bishop some room, gains some queenside space. Rook e1 played, so this supports e4, prepares a later d4, can't say prepares this morning. Bishop a7 now from Alireza, so he nudges that one back, anticipating d4. h6 is more common there, by the way, but Alireza neglects to play that in this game. I mean, this is one of the reasons the players love these kind of positions. They're so nuanced, you can mix up the move orders, try and trick your opponent. Very, very rich positions. So knight beats d2 from Leinier. He wants to maneuver this one round like this. Again, a common idea. Also supports d4 because you're covering here. Now we had knight to e7 from Alireza. So he's transferring this one to the queen side, king side rather, and also clears the way for the c pawns. You can go c6, d5 at the right moment. Try and stake a bit more of a claim in the center yourself as black. And Leinier now goes d4. So the knight left the support of that square. Classic idea from white. The knight comes to g6, just in time to cover the pawn, so you can't take twice with the knight, etc. Now we had bishop b3 from Leinier, and this is an instructive moment, by the way. When you're the side with the space in the center, you know, white's got two pawns here, black's only got one. Well, you don't have to rush things with resolving that central tension. The longer you've got the space, the longer you'll suffocate your opponent. They're the one that needs to look for pawn breaks or to initiate piece exchanges. So Leinier just tucks back this bishop. c6 from Alireza. He prepares d5 at the right moment in the future. And now bishop to c2. So you might be thinking, well, why on earth would the bishop leave this wonderful diagonal, come here, stare at its own pawn? Well, again, it's geared up to the deep understanding that the moment black goes d5 and you open the position with pawn takes, well, then the bishop springs to life, of course. So Alireza now does that immediately, actually. This wasn't forced. Pawn recaptures, and then he goes d5. Now, why on earth would you do this? It allows pawn to e5. So in the space for couple moves, white's now kind of dominating the center. They've got the space. Your knight's getting kicked. It can't hop to e4 without the loss of a pawn. Your bishop's looking pretty blunted. Well, there's only one move for black here that keeps the game going. If you go knight e8, knight d7, you're doomed to passivity for the rest of the game. Really good position for white. But knight here, knight h5, this is the key. So Alireza's got this dark squared strategy now. He wants to plant a knight here, go f6, break open the position for the rook, and maybe even bounce the bishop back round like this to b8 one day, or even try and crash through here. So this is the whole strategy. And because the pawn's on h3 and not g3, it makes it really hard to actually stop the knight landing on f4. So Leinier goes knight f1, opens up this bishop to protect the square. The knight hops, and now he chops that one off. Good move. As long as that knight's sitting there protected, that bishop will be dead anyway. And after the knight recaptures, well, now he can actually kick the knight out of there with queen to d2. Because you can't actually defend that knight. You know, you can't go queen g5 or here because the knight covers. If you go g5, it's a very, very weakening move. Look at the f5 square, not what you want. So instead the knight hops back to e6, and just a wonderful square for that knight. Knights blockade past pawns so well because they can actually peer over the pawn and still influence the position, as we can see. So when Alireza goes f6, which he plans to do, this knight sits perfectly to support that pawn break. So knight g3 now played by Leinier, pawn to f6. So Alireza really wants to crank things open down the f-file, look at this pawn, try and bring this bishop to life one day if he can. And now this is a really instructive moment. Usually this light squared bishop is such a prized piece in these structures, excuse me. But here actually, when you're kind of clicking around and going deeper on the position, this is actually the best move it emerges. You just want to give this bishop for this really powerful knight because it just does so much for the attacking chances of the black position. So now if you go g6, well, you can chop that knight, bishop recaptures, and actually just play quite slowly here, rook e3, prepare to double, and just leave that tension. As long as you've got the pawns, you suffocate black. If ever we have a captures here, then we go with the, you can go with the knight here actually as well because the pawn's still covered, but we can see this is looking pretty nice for white. Not that Alireza would capture straight away. So giving up bishop for knight, absolutely key in this position for white, really interesting. But Leinier goes with the knight here, looks so natural. They talk about a knight on f5 being worth a pawn, such an aggressive square around the king. You even look here in some lines, who knows? But now we had takes on e5. And the big problem now for Leinier is that he has to actually capture with the rook, because if you go with the knight, which he does, then you leave the protection of this pawn. Now he was hesitant to go with the rook, doesn't look very natural, and you can run into this bishop b8 move. This is one of the problems, and actually white should be giving an exchange here, or there's some crazy stuff with knight h6 check to try and open the king, get some drawing chances going. Then the queen comes in, supported by the bishop. Computer gives that position level when you click around. But say white just, say white just retreated the rook, much more natural move. Well, now you can go g6, kick the knight, check, king g7, say this one drops back, top move in the position. Well, now there's this beautiful sack on f3, very, very thematic. The pawn recapped, so rook e6 is then the best move to actually sack back the exchange because this knight's so powerful. If you capture, then the knight hits f4, look at this. And because the queen's coming to h4, supported by the knight, this is just absolutely game over for white. So this is really just to demonstrate here, the problems in Leinier's position. So after he puts the knight on f5, if we just recap, this is the mistake because Alireza captures. Now you have to go with the rook, but then you run into some problems I just showed. Because Leinier goes with the knight, well, now you can go g6. You kick the defender of this pawn, it's attacked twice, so the d4 pawn is dropping. Now first check, king g7, this knight drops to g4, protects this one, looks to kind of open the rook and create some danger around the king, but Alireza now chops here, and because he's picked up that critical pawn, now he's opened the bishop. Look at how his pieces are now converging on f2. So queen c3 by Leinier, excellent move. He pins this knight. I say excellent move, it's not the best computer move, but a good practical move. You pin the knight, you create tactical complications. And now Alireza takes on g4, another great move. He eliminates one of those attacking threats around his king, and after the knight recaptures, well, now he's also freed up his h-pawn. He pushes h5, and he's actually winning a piece in this position. Just really incredible. So if you play the very natural knight e5, well, again, this is the problem. Maybe you can see the tactic here. If you want to pause and have a think, please do so. So the move here for black is rook takes on f2. Now if the king recaptures, well, then there's knight b5. Discovered check, you're winning the queen. This is the problem. So you can't bring the knight to e5. What if you come to e3, try and cover this diagonal? Well, as you can imagine, there's a ton of tactical problems. Queen f6 is one of the best moves here. Queen h4 also good. So you're threatening this check stuff, and you can't even block with the rook because then there's knight e2 check, forking queen and king. What if you go f3? Well, as you can imagine, this is horrendous, opening this diagonal to the king. Now we can take on c2. Now you have to recapture with the queen because the knight is pinned. So if you swap with check, Well, now you can't even take back. Your rooks are also forked. Awful. So you'd have to take with the queen here. And then this d4 move is really nice. There are different winning moves there, but you're actually winning the whole knight. I mean, say you tried to save it, come to c4. Well, then there's d3 check. Again, the queen is just so unfortunately placed. Look at this star bishop here. Anyway, so these are the problems with trying to save the knight. So Leinier goes rook e6. Fantastic counter-attack move. These guys are just so good at recognizing the tactics in an instant. I mean, he's down to 30 seconds now. So Alireza picks up the piece. We had takes on g6, supported by the bishop. The king comes to f7, and now rook e1, another great move, bringing more firepower to the attack. You know, this is scary for black. Yes, you're a piece up, but look at the attack coming on your king, and already Alireza goes wrong here. So he correctly sees that he should try and trade one of these rooks, one of these attacking pieces, but you should do it via rook g8, because then you don't lose this pawn in the same circumstances. White would have to take, okay, game goes on, but instead he goes rook e8 to trade this one, but now white can pick up another pawn here, plus keep the pawn structure intact. Yes, Alireza trades, queen recaptures, but after queen f6, there's still a lot of attacking chances for white here. It's not so straightforward. So the bishop checks, the king drops back, and now again, this is so computery. So the computer gives the position level, but you have to find bishop to h7, this crazy looking move. And the whole idea is that you're threatening to check here, pick up the rook, so you don't have time to go knight e6, this key defensive move, holding everything together, because then we check and we pick up the rook. This is the whole problem. So bishop h7, that's the move, but okay, very tough to find. Leinier goes queen e3, much more natural. These pieces are quite nicely placed, so you want to bring another piece into the attack, check the king, get some stuff going. But the problem with this one is now you can go knight to e6, and you defend everything, plus open up this bishop to attack the queen. In those other lines, by the way, where the rook comes, the bishop comes here, threatening this rook stuff, well, then you have to move the rook to b8 or d8 to save it, but then the bishop's unprotected, so after queen e3, you can't go here because the bishop's attacked. Sorry if that's a bit deep, but you know, these are the subtle things the computer finds. But here you can drop knight e6, white checks, king moves, and the king's just running. It's completely safe on these dark squares. Once again, this knight is just the star of the show, and anytime you have a knight around a king, the queen will never be able to keep giving checks. The knight is such a good defender. So king h2 now played. Alireza was threatening here. He takes the pawn anyway. Queen h7 check played, king d6, and now bishop f5 was played. If you chop this pawn, hitting the rook, well, you're just getting mated with queen e5 check. Once again, Alireza's having a party on these dark squares. If you go with the rook, well, obviously we're taking, leading to mate, or maybe you take like this, best move, I didn't really analyse. If g3, well, again, there's queen to e2. We're about to open up the discovery, checkmate the king. None of it's any good. This leads to mate like this. Anyway, so queen takes on b7, no good. You're getting checkmated. So bishop f5 played, but now Alireza can just start trading things down. Rook h8 played, queen g6, he swaps, rook takes, rook e8, everything's rock solid. Here Leinier resigned, he's just a clean bishop down, same number of pawns as well. So beautiful crush. Let's have a look at the second game they played. Alireza has white. So he kicks off here with pawn to c4, the English attack. He was playing this all tournament. Leinier goes c5, the symmetrical variation, g3 from Alireza, g6, both players prepare to fianchetto. We see that immediately here, and now knight c3, knight c6, and d3 from Alireza. So he's not looking to stake this big claim in the centre. He gives Leinier the centre, as we'll see, and he actually adopts this kind of Benoni pawn structure in a moment. Very dynamic, very tricky kind of play that then ensues. So queen d2 was now played. Weird looking move, I know. Blocks this bishop's development, but Alireza wants to go b3, bishop b2. So by developing the queen, you now protect the knight, prepare to go pawn to b3. So e6 from Leinier, now pawn to b3, and now knight g to e7, classic kind of development from black. This knight's very flexible here, supports pawn to d5, maybe one day it jumps to f5, and you leave the eyes of the bishop open down this wonderful diagonal. So bishop b2 from Alireza, castle's played, and now knight to f3. So Alireza's just fully accepting that Leinier can take the centre now, which he does. He just castles the king, lets d4 come, and then puts the knight out here on the rim of the board. So this is not for the faint-hearted, because after b6, covering this pawn, where is this knight actually going? Awful piece right now, no jumps, and even when the bishop moves, what kind of journey is this knight actually going on? And it stays here for a very long time. So this is the risk of such structures. You can really just get flattened if you're not very careful. So now we had e3 played, e5 from Leinier, he bolsters his centre, Alireza chops, pawn recaptures, and this is the Benoni structure I was talking about. So you often see black with this pawn formation, white's the one with the space, and here the ideas are to play a3, b4, classic kind of pawn break, sometimes even at the expense of a pawn just to rip open lines. The other ideas are playing down the e-file, which we also see some of, or chucking this h-pawn in certain positions, knight h2, g4, sometimes looking at dark squares, the bishop tucks back, all these kind of attacking ideas for white. But black's better, no two ways about it. So a3 played, preparing b4, a5 squashes that one, so Alireza comes to the open file. Rook b8 now played, so it covers this pawn from the knight, you want to keep it boxed in, also allows the queen to activate at the right moment. And now bishop c1 from Alireza, he wants to reactivate that piece, it's doing nothing on this diagonal, he'd love to bring it to f4. And so h6 plays against that, nice play from Leinier, because now when the queen tucks back, prepares bishop f4, well then g5 comes, covers that square. But okay, it's double-edged, Alireza's got something to nibble on now with pawn to h4. So he starts with rook a2, lifts and prepares to double here. And now I was going to say we have bishop d7, although I did want to mention in this moment actually, this is where Leinier just plays a little bit tentatively. So queen d6 is a nice move here, top engine move. You develop the queen first, activate it a bit more, then you can look at this bishop later on, or even leave it for the time being. It is still playing in the game right now, but if you go queen d6, then after pawn h4, you have to be prepared to go pawn to f6 and play with this structure. You can't kick on with g4 because then bishop f4 comes, skewering queen and rook, all this kind of stuff. I mean, you'd have to drop the knight soon, but okay, white gets that play. But Leinier doesn't go queen d6, he goes bishop d7, and so his idea after pawn to h4, which Alireza plays, is that he won't look to maintain this structure and just keep white kind of suffocated, which is playable, still a bit better for black. Instead, he goes g4. Now, it's still a nice space grab, kicks the knight back to h2, then you go h5 to bolster the pawn. Look at this miserable knight. I mean, these are the worst knights you've ever seen, but it does now give some squares for the dark squared bishop, and if Alireza can ever break out, well, this is going to get very, very tactical, just what Alireza wants. Now he starts with f3, which is a mistake. So you should go bishop to f4 first. Very important move, because you cover this pawn and you stop the black bishop from coming to e5. You hit this rook, so say rook c8, then you carry on. Position goes on from here. You can play f3 soon at the right moment. But Alireza starts with f3, and now bishop e5 was a very powerful move, which Leinier missed. Now the reason this is so good, if you carry on chopping here, bishop captures, hits the rook, say it slides across, well now we can take with check, king takes, and knight e5. And these knights are just springing into the position. Say you take, this knight comes in, the queen is opened up. You know, this is awful for white. So where are we? So yeah, after bishop e5, taking on the pawn here would be no good. And if you tried king f2 to cover, by the way, this is a really beautiful line, well then you can actually just take, sack an entire piece, because then we go knight f5 check. The king has to come here, only square. Well, you could come up the board, but then you're not long for this world. So after it retreats, then we check, we pick up the knight. Again, horrendous, the queen's coming in. So really, really beautiful attacking ideas. Bishop e5 was just a killer move. I guess Alireza would have had to give up an exchange or something, but yeah, would have been very tough after that. But Leinier misses it. He goes knight to e5 instead. The Alireza effect, they just don't find the best moves. You know, he's got this aura at the board now, especially in Blitz. And now Alireza captures here, the pawn recaptures, and he doubles these rooks on the open file. So as long as black can maintain this pawn and keep the knight blocked out, then they're doing okay. But that's really easier said than done here, because you never quite find time to go pawn to f5. For example, the knight's attacked right now, and so the pawn actually goes to f6 to defend it. If you start trying all this knight c6 stuff, it's just not working tactically, basically. But I won't go through too many lines. We'll stick with the game. Pawn f6 played. Now the rook came to e4, and it's all linked with trying to get this knight out of the box. So bishop c6 was now played, but it wasn't the best move. Better was something like queen to c8. Excuse me. Just trying to hold this pawn for a bit longer. But after bishop to c6 here, well, now Alireza, he's not even thinking about the exchange. He's thinking, what's the best way for me to sack the exchange, get my knight out of the box, and he goes for this one. Best move. Yes, Leinier picks up that rook, but what's a measly rook when you've now got this huge attack in motion, light squared control coming soon. And after this move of knight takes on g4, rook recaptures, we can really see the pressure now coming down against the black king. And you had to go with the rook there, by the way, not the queen, or else you were running into pawn to f5. f5 now comes anyway, and Alireza goes rook to g5. Great move, the most accurate play. If you came to f4, it was blocked by the pawn. Bishop e5 was coming, hitting this one, no good. But from here, we keep this bishop pinned. So rook f6 was played now. Ideas of covering this pawn, freeing up this rook after bishop to f4. Plus you look at this pawn coming down here. But now bishop f4 comes anyway. The rook slides across and Alireza goes bishop to e5. So Leinier's pieces are just really getting misplaced now. He slides across here with rook to g6 to challenge that aggressive piece. But now here comes the light squared bishop. Now you can start with queen h5, also a great move. But Alireza checks first. Now it looks like you can just take this one, right? But then you lose the rook. The knight is overloaded with the protection. Alireza is just so quick on the tactics. Look at the time. Leinier's got 13 seconds to almost a minute. So he moves his king and now bang, the queen invades, comes to h5, and it's just so difficult to defend. The top engine move here is queen to e8 to cover this rook some more. But then, for example, you can just take on f5, give another exchange here. So you're a double exchange down. But look at these bishops just absolutely raking across the board. Now the king would come to e7, and this h5 move's just an absolute killer. Where does the rook go? Say it came here, well then you're simply dropping a bishop. It's just all horrendous, collapsing. So coming back here, queen e8, best defense, but still lost. Instead we had takes on e5. Alireza takes here, now recaptures, queen takes back, and all the black pieces are just overloaded. Checkmate is threatened here, so Leinier goes queen c7, he covers that one, also protects his rook from these check and then pick up the rook tactics. But now Alireza has multiple winning moves. You can check already, you can take on f5, he goes for knight takes on b6, so the rook is hit, you can't take with the queen or you get mated. So the rook slides across, and now queen g8 check, king e7, queen here. Now Leinier resigned. It's about to be checkmate. One more move would have been played, and Alireza would have delivered this hammer blow. So an absolutely epic king hunt. This was really one of my favourite games of the tournament. How all of those pieces just came together. Finally, the knight landed on b6. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff from Alireza. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do consider subscribing if you never want to miss a future one. Check out the membership section in case you want some more interaction with myself, some coaching, some different video playlists. And I hope to see you again on a future video. If you want to see another epic Alireza crush from St. Louis, then click here. Thanks for watching. See you soon.